The great space station called Harmony floated in the silent blackness. It was a place for many different species to meet and talk. Its halls were filled with the sounds of clicking claws, slithering scales, and translated voices from 100 different worlds. In one of the main meeting rooms, a human man named Taiho stood facing a much larger creature. This was Ambassador Kalar of the Cathari Empire. Kalar was tall, with thick green scales and cold yellow eyes. He looked like a lizard that stood on 2 legs. Behind Taiho were 2 other humans, a woman named Suman, who watched everything with sharp eyes, and a man named Jin, who looked very worried. The problem was a small planet called Viridian 4. A group of human families had gone there to build a new home. They had been there for 2 years, turning the cold air into something they could breathe. They called their little town New Hope, but the Cathari Empire also wanted Viridian 4. They wanted the special metals under its ground. "You are thieves on a world that belongs to the Cathari," Kalar said, his voice a low hiss from the translator device on his chest. "Taiho," the human diplomat tried to stay calm. "Ambassador, our settlement was there first. We have filed all the correct papers with the Galactic Commons. We have the right to be there." Kalar let out a rough sound, a laugh that was not friendly. "Your papers?" he sneered. "You are new to this galaxy. You do not understand how things work. Strength is the only right that matters. Your species is soft. You live for such a short time. You have no claws, no sharp teeth. You are prey." The insult hung in the air. Suman felt her face get hot with anger, but she did not speak. Her job was to listen and record. Jin, the scientist, looked down at the floor, feeling sick. Taiho stood up straighter. "We are a peaceful species. We believe in laws and agreements." "Peaceful?" Kalar took a step forward, his large shadow falling over the humans. "That is just a word for the weak. The Cathari take what we deserve, and we deserve that planet." "This is not right," Taiho said, his voice rising. He was losing his calm. "You can't just push us around because you are bigger." On the other side of the station, in a small docking bay, the human scout ship Odyssey was connected to a port. Its captain, a woman named Hanul, was watching the meeting on a screen in her room. She saw Taiho getting angry. She saw the Cathari ambassador looking down on him. A bad feeling grew in her stomach. Back in the meeting room, Kalar seemed to enjoy Taiho's anger. "You raise your voice. How very emotional, it proves my point. You are not ready for the great galaxy." He turned to a large screen on the wall. "Let me show you what right looks like." He pressed a button on a device in his hand. The screen lit up. It showed a view from space looking down at the green and blue surface of Viridian 4. You could just see the small, neat circles of the human settlement. "No," Jin whispered, his breath catching. Then a bright light flashed from a Cathari warship in orbit. A beam of energy shot down and hit the center of New Hope. The screen showed a huge explosion of fire and dirt. When the smoke cleared, there was only a black, burning scar on the land. The town was gone. The room was completely silent. Taiho was frozen, his mouth open. All the color had left his face. Suman stared at the screen, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Jin felt like he might be sick. He thought of the people, the families, the children he had seen in the reports playing in the fields. Kalar turned back to them, his yellow eyes showing no feeling at all. "The problem is solved. The Cathari have claimed Viridian 4 by right of conquest. Do you have any more papers you wish to show me?" Taiho could not speak. He just shook his head, his body trembling. "Good," Kalar hissed. He turned and walked out of the room, his guards following him. The moment the Cathari were gone, the human delegation seemed to collapse. Taiho fell into a chair, his head in his hands. Suman rushed to the communications panel on the table. "I need to send a message to Earth now." But before she could type anything, a new voice came from the speaker. It was Captain Hanul from the Odyssey. Her voice was calm, but it was a cold, hard calm. "All human personnel," she said. "This is Captain Hanul. Initiate communication silence. No outgoing messages. No calls for help. No protest to the Galactic Commons. Return to the Odyssey immediately." "That is a direct order." Soman looked up, shocked. "Captain, did you see what they just did? We have to tell Earth. We have to do something." Hanul's voice did not change. "I saw. Now follow your orders, Officer Kim. Return to the ship." Back on the Odyssey in her quiet room, Hanul turned off the screen. The image of the burning planet was gone. She took a slow, deep breath. The grief was there, a sharp pain in her heart for the lost people. The anger was there too, a hot fire in her chest, but she did not let them out. She pushed them down deep inside. This was not a time for feelings. This was a time for something else, something much older and much colder. She looked out her window at the stars. She thought about human history. She thought about all the wars, all the times they had nearly destroyed themselves. She thought about the lessons learned over thousands of years. The Cathari thought humans were weak because they talked about peace. They thought they were prey because they had no scales or claws. They were wrong. Hanul pressed a button on her desk. Jin, Suman, Taiho, my ready room the moment you are on board. She knew what came next. The galaxy had just pushed the quiet, peaceful humans into a corner, and they were about to learn a very old, very brutal human lesson. You should never, ever corner a predator. The heavy door of the Odyssey slid shut with a final hiss, sealing out the artificial light and gentle music of the Harmony station. Inside the human ship, the air was different. It was still and cold. The only sound was the low hum of the engines. Jin, Suman, and a pale, shaking Taiho walked down the corridor. The crew they passed did not speak. Their faces were hard. Their eyes were focused on their work. There were no tears, no shouts of anger. The silence was heavier than any noise. They entered Captain Hanul's ready room. She was standing by a large window, her back to them, looking at the stars. She did not turn around. Taiho found his voice first. It was a broken whisper. Captain, they killed them all. We have to send a message. We must inform the government. We must demand justice from the Galactic Commons. Hanul was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice calm and flat. No. Soman burst out, unable to hold back. Captain, with respect, we have to do something. We can't just sit here. Now Hanul turned. Her face was like stone. There was no anger in her eyes. There was no grief. There was only a deep, terrifying certainty. They have made a miscalculation, she said. A very, very large one. She walked to her desk and tapped a few buttons. A star map appeared. Officer Kim, you will send a message. But not to Earth. You will send a priority Omega signal. The authentication code is Gray Horizon. Suman's breath caught in her throat. She was a communications officer. She knew all the codes. She had trained for years. She had never ever used a priority Omega. It was the last, most secret signal. It was not a call for help. It was an activation code. Gray Horizon, Jin said, his voice soft. What is that? It is the answer, Hanul said. Send it, officer. Suman moved to the console on the wall. Her fingers trembled as she typed in the long, complex code. She entered Gray Horizon and pressed send. A single powerful pulse of data shot out from the Odyssey, aimed not at Earth, but at a series of secret automated relay stations scattered through the galaxy. What have you done? Taiho asked, his eyes wide. I have reminded our people who we are, Hanul said. Now we wait. On Mars, in a dusty control center buried under red rock, a light turned from green to red. A low, repeating alarm sounded. The few men and women in the room stopped what they were doing. They looked at each other. There were no words. One of them, a woman with short black hair, picked up a red telephone. There was no dial on it. She simply said one word into the receiver. Horizon. Then she hung up. Across the solar system, the same thing happened. On Jupiter's moon Europa, deep under the ice, a signal was received. In the asteroid belt, inside a hollowed-out rock, a computer system woke up. On Earth itself, in a quiet office in a nondescript building, a man read the message on his screen. He picked up a phone and said, It's time. Initiate Gray Horizon. What happened next was not a declaration of war. There were no speeches by leaders. There were no crowds cheering for battle. It was something much quieter and much more frightening. The great shipyards around Jupiter, which usually built massive cargo freighters, went silent. Then huge doors slid open and the half-built freighters were moved into new bays. Blueprints that had been hidden in computers for decades were finally accessed. Workers who had been trained for this their whole lives without ever speaking of it arrived for their shifts. They did not talk. They just went to work. On Mars, factories that made farming equipment for colony worlds stopped making plows. The same machines that shaped metal for plows now began to shape it for armor plates. The same conveyor belts that carried engine parts for mining lasers now carried parts for plasma cannons. It was like watching a giant machine come to life. Every part knew its job. There was no confusion. There was no panic. It was a quiet, terrible efficiency. A news reporter on Earth, a woman named Yuna, tried to report on the strange changes. She stood in front of a factory that had once made communication satellites. "As you can see," she said to the camera, "the activity here has tripled overnight, but no one will tell us what they are building. The government is not commenting. The military is silent. The most chilling part is the quiet. There is no anger. There is only work." She approached a worker who was leaving the factory. "Sir, can you tell us what is happening? Are we going to war?" The worker, a middle-aged man named Day, looked at her. His face was tired, but his eyes were clear. "They hurt the family," he said simply. Then he walked away. That phrase was repeated everywhere. On the networks, people talked about the attack on Viridian 4. They called it the hurt. There was no call for revenge. There was only a shared understanding. They had hurt the human family. And when you hurt the family protects itself. Back on the Odyssey, the crew watched the reports from home on a delayed feed. They saw the factories on Mars. They saw the shipyards at Jupiter. Taiho watched, his face confused. "I don't understand. Where is the fleet? Our navy is small. It cannot fight the Cathari." Hanul finally showed a small, cold smile. "Who said anything about a navy?" She pointed to the screen, which showed a massive, unarmed cargo ship being moved into a construction bay. "That diplomat is a heavy cruiser. It just doesn't know it yet." Jin understood first. His scientific mind saw the pattern. "They are converting civilian ships," he whispered. "All of them. They were designed for this." "Yes," Hanul said. "A long time ago we decided that a standing war fleet was a provocation. It showed that you were looking for a fight. So we built something else. We built a sleeping army. We built a hidden sword." She looked at her crew. "The Cathari think we are weak because we have no claws. They are wrong. Our strength was never in our claws. It was in our mind. It was in our ability to plan, to hide, and to wait. We spent our whole history imagining the worst things that could happen. We prepared for them. The Cathari just became one of those worst things." Suman looked from the captain to the screen. The fear she had felt was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard feeling. It was the feeling of a door locking shut. "What are our orders, Captain?" Hanul walked back to the window. The Harmony station still floated peacefully nearby, its lights blinking. The Cathari expect us to cry, or to run, or to beg the Galactic Commons for help. They expect a reaction from a prey species. So we will give them nothing. We will be silent. We will be still. And we will get ready. She turned to face them, her figure outlined by the starlight. Let them enjoy their victory. Soon they will learn that they did not kill a group of helpless settlers. They woke up a sleeping giant. And now that giant is putting on its armor. The silence from humanity was the loudest sound in the galaxy. For weeks there were no messages from Earth, no protests, no demands. The human delegation had left the Harmony station without a word. The Cathari ambassador Kalar found it amusing. He boasted to anyone who would listen. "You see? They are animals who understand only strength. They have slunk away with their tails between their legs." But others in the Galactic Commons were not so sure. The complete lack of response was unnatural. It was not the behavior of a scared species. It was the behavior of a species that was calculating. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Captain Hanul finally broke her own communication silence. A single coded data packet was sent to Earth. It contained just 2 words, Sol's doorstep. The response was immediate. All across human space, engines flared to life. Ships began to move. But they were not the sleek, sharp warships of the Cathari. They were the bulky, slow, and familiar shapes of civilian vessels. A massive long-haul freighter named the Starlight Hauler, which usually carried ice from Saturn's rings, changed its course. A swarm of mining barges from the asteroid belt, their hulls scarred and dusty, powered up their drives. A dozen deep space research vessels covered in sensitive antennae turned away from their studies and began to move inward, toward the sun. The Cathari sensors detected the movement immediately. "They are running," Kalar declared on his flagship, the Claw of Victory. "They are gathering their pitiful ships near their homeworld for a last sad stand." "It is exactly what Prey does," he gave the order. The entire Cathari war fleet, 100 sharp and deadly ships, jumped toward the Sol system. They would crush this human nuisance once and for all and teach the rest of the galaxy a lesson. When the Cathari fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the sight that greeted them was confusing. There was no organized human defense fleet. There was only a messy, disorganized cloud of ships drifting between Mars and Earth. It looked like a traffic jam. There were freighters, tugs, science ships, and even a large passenger liner. They seemed to be moving with no purpose. Kalar laughed, a harsh, grating sound. He opened a galaxy-wide broadcast. People of Earth, you see the power of the Cathari. Your silence has not saved you. Your gathering of trash will not save you. Surrender your system to us now, or we will burn your world as we burned your colony. On the bridge of the Odyssey, which was hidden near a moon of Jupiter, the crew listened to the broadcast. He's so sure of himself, Suman said, her voice cold. He sees what he wants to see, Hanul replied. He sees a herd of frightened animals. He doesn't see the trap. On the Cathari bridge, Kalar grew impatient. Destroy that large freighter first, he ordered, pointing at the Starlight hauler. Let them see what happens to those who defy us. A Cathari warship fired a bright green plasma beam. It shot across space and struck the freighter's hull. But instead of exploding in a fiery ball, the ship shuddered. A large section of its outer hull, painted to look like worn metal, vaporized away. Underneath was a dark, polished surface that reflected the stars. Then the Starlight hauler began to change. All across the ship, panels slid back. Sections of the hull that looked like cargo containers rotated, revealing the deadly barrels of massive railguns. The entire spine of the freighter extended, and a powerful energy shield flickered to life around it. In less than a minute, the harmless-looking freighter had transformed into a powerful, heavily armed battleship. Kalar's jaw dropped. What is this? A trick. It was not just one trick. It was 1,000. All across the space between Mars and Earth, the same thing happened. The mining barges shed their false, rocky exteriors, becoming swift and deadly gunboats. The research vessels opened panels to reveal missile launchers and electronic warfare arrays. The passenger liner split in half, the two sections moving apart to become the command centers for a swarm of small, AI-piloted fighter craft. The messy cloud of civilian ships was gone. In its place was a perfectly organized, terrifyingly powerful warfleet. They moved into formation with a quiet, flawless precision. There were no shouted orders, no confusion. It was as if a single mind controlled them all. The Cathari fleet was no longer facing a group of helpless civilians. They were facing an army that had been hiding in plain sight. Open fire. Destroy them all! Kalar screamed, his voice cracking. The space between the fleets became a storm of light and metal. The Cathari fought as they always had, with loud roars and aggressive charges. They were predators used to seeing their enemies run. The humans did not run. A Cathari ship targeted a human gunboat that had been a mining ship. The gunboat didn't try to dodge. It flew straight toward the blast. At the last second, it swerved and the plasma beam missed. The gunboat fired a single, precise shot that hit the Cathari ship's engine port. The Cathari ship shuddered, and then went dark, its power systems dead. Another human ship, a former freighter, used its powerful tractor beam, once used for moving asteroids, to grab a Cathari warship. It swung the warship around and smashed it into one of its sister ships. Both Cathari ships exploded in a silent, brilliant flash. The humans fought with a cold, emotionless efficiency. They did not scream threats. They did not boast. They simply dismantled the Cathari fleet piece by piece. They targeted engines and weapons, leaving life support active. It was not an act of mercy. It was a message: we can kill you, but we choose not to. Yet, on the Odyssey, Jin watched the battle on his screen. He was not looking at ships. He was studying the biology of the Cathari. He saw how they moved, how they reacted to stress. He noticed a small, almost invisible organ near their brainstem that regulated their fear response. I have an idea, he said quietly to Captain Hanul. It's not a weapon that breaks their ships. It's one that breaks their will. Hanul listened to his plan. She nodded. Do it, Jin sent his data to the fleet. A moment later, a new type of signal was broadcast. It was a low-frequency sound wave, tuned to the exact resonance of that Cathari fear organ. On the claw of victory, Kalar did not hear anything, but he felt it. A deep primal terror flooded his body. It was a fear older than his civilization. It was the fear of being hunted. He saw his crew begin to panic. They were losing their minds without a single shot being fired. He looked at the main screen. The human fleet was now moving forward, a wall of silent, unreadable ships. They were not celebrating. They were not angry. They were just coming. For the first time in his life, Ambassador Kalar felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. He had thought humans were prey. He was wrong. He had not been hunting. He had been walking into a den of predators, and now the door was shut. The battle was over. What followed was the hunt. The Cathari fleet was broken. Their formation was shattered. The fear signal developed by Jinn pulsed through space, an invisible wave that turned proud warriors into terrified animals. On the bridges of their ships, the Cathari crews were shaking. They could not think clearly. Their instincts screamed at them to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Captain Hanul's voice was calm on the fleet-wide channel. All units execute pattern Gamma. Take away their teeth. Leave them their eyes. I want them to see what comes next. The human ships moved. They did not fly like the Cathari, with sharp, aggressive turns. They moved like water, flowing around the enemy, surrounding them. A Cathari cruiser, the Sky Render, tried to rally. Its captain roared orders to fire all weapons. A hail of plasma bolts shot toward a human ship that had once been a deep space observatory. The human ship did not fire back. Instead, it launched a cloud of small metallic spheres. The spheres flew into the path of the plasma bolts, absorbing the energy and glowing red-hot. Then they attached themselves to the hull of the Sky Render. There was no explosion. Instead, the spheres began to vibrate, their frequency matching the molecular structure of the Cathari ship's armor. The armor did not break. It turned to dust, flaking away into space and leaving the ship's inner parts exposed and helpless. This was how the humans fought. They did not use brute force. They used science. They used tricks the galaxy had never seen. Another Cathari ship, a fast attack vessel, tried to run. It turned and sped away from the main fight. A single human gunboat, small and fast, followed it. The Cathari ship fired its rear lasers. The human pilot, a young woman named Mie, calculated the pattern of the blasts. She flew her ship not away from the fire, but through the empty spaces between the bolts. It was a beautiful and terrifying dance. When she was close enough, she did not fire a missile. She fired a grappling hook made of super-strong cable. The hook latched onto the Cathari ship's engine. Mie's small gunboat then spun around, using its own momentum to twist the cable. The Cathari ship was jerked into a violent spin, its crew thrown around inside until they were all unconscious. The ship drifted unharmed but completely disabled. The humans were not destroying the Cathari. They were dissecting them. On the bridge of the Cathari flagship, the Claw of Victory, the scene was one of panic. The fear signal made it hard to think. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Kalar gripped his command chair, his claws digging into the metal. "Fight them," he screamed. "They are just humans." But his crew was falling apart. One of his officers pointed a shaking claw at the main screen. "Look!" The screen showed a massive human ship, the one that had been the Starlight Hauler. It was moving slowly toward them. It was not firing its powerful railguns. Instead, a large bay door opened on its underside. A strange shimmering energy field flickered within the opening. "What is that? What are they doing?" Kalar demanded. A sensor officer, his voice trembling, said, "I am reading a powerful gravity field. It is not a weapon. It is a tractor beam, but it is too powerful." The Starlight Hauler beam reached out. It did not grab the Claw of Victory. It grabbed a nearby smaller Cathari destroyer that was trying to flee. The beam latched onto the destroyer. Then, with impossible strength, the human ship swung the captured destroyer around like a club. Kalar could only watch in horror as the destroyer was smashed into another one of his ships. The two Cathari vessels crumpled into each other in a silent, grinding crash of metal and fire. The human ship had used the Cathari's own ship as a weapon. It was a message of utter contempt. The fight went out of the Cathari fleet then. They were not being defeated in battle. They were being taken apart by a species that fought with a cold, intelligent cruelty they could not understand. Their ships were being captured, disabled, or turned against each other. Their weapons were useless. Their courage was broken by a sound they could not even hear. One by one, the Cathari ships stopped fighting. Their weapons went silent. Their engines powered down. They surrendered not because they were beaten, but because they were terrified of what the humans would do next. The silence returned. The space around Mars was filled with the dead and drifting hulks of the Cathari fleet. The human ships, their weapons now still, held their positions. They were not celebrating. They were just waiting. On the Odyssey, Suman looked at the main screen. It showed the dying light of the broken Cathari ships. "It's over," she said quietly. Hanul shook her head. "No, the battle is over. The lesson is not." She stood up. "Prepare a boarding shuttle. I am going over to the Cathari flagship." Jin looked up, worried. "Captain, is that safe?" "They could still be dangerous." Hanul looked at the image of the Claw of Victory, its hull scarred and dark. "They are not dangerous anymore. They are frightened, and it is time for their ambassador to understand the price of his mistake." She walked toward the door, her steps firm and sure. The hunt was over. Now it was time for the predator to look its prey in the eye. The inside of the Cathari flagship was a tomb. The lights were dim and red. The air was cold. The only sounds were the faint crackle of broken electronics and the low, pained breathing of the crew. The fear signal had done its work. It had not killed them, but it had broken their spirit. They lay on the floor or slumped at their stations, their yellow eyes wide with a terror they could not name. Captain Hanul walked through the ship. Her boots made a soft sound on the metal floor. She was not wearing a heavy spacesuit, just a simple uniform and a helmet. She carried no visible weapon. Behind her were two of her crew, their faces hidden behind their helmets. They did not point their guns at the fallen Cathari. They did not need to. They reached the bridge. The door was broken, hanging from one hinge. Hanul stepped inside. The scene was one of complete defeat. Most of the crew were unconscious. A few looked up at the humans, their bodies trembling. In the center of the room, sitting in his large command chair, was Ambassador Kalar. He was not the proud creature from the meeting room. His scales seemed dull. One of his arms was held close to his body as if it was hurt. He looked very old. He watched Hanul as she walked toward him. He expected to see anger on her face. He expected to see the hot fire of revenge. He saw nothing. Her face was calm. Her eyes were quiet. This was more frightening than any rage. Kalar tried to speak. His voice was a dry whisper. You have won. Is that what you want to hear? You have beaten us." Hanul stopped in front of him. She did not answer. She just looked at him. "Why?" Kalar asked, his voice gaining a little strength from his confusion. "Why did you not just fight us? Why this horror? This fear?" Hanul tilted her head. "You called us prey. We simply showed you what a real predator looks like. A predator does not kill for sport. It kills to survive, and it makes sure its enemies understand the cost of the hunt." Kalar shook his head. "I do not understand. Your ships, they were hidden. Your weapons, they are not like any we have seen. What are you?" Finally, Hanul knelt down. She was now at eye level with the broken ambassador. Her voice was soft, but each word was like a piece of ice. "We are a species that spent thousands of years trying to destroy ourselves," she said. "We invented every terrible way to kill. We made bombs that could shatter worlds. We made plagues that could wipe out cities. We fought war after war after war." She looked around the broken bridge. "And then we stopped. We looked at what we had done and we were horrified. We decided to change. We decided to be better, to be peaceful. But we are not stupid. We never forgot what we learned." She looked back at Kalar. "So we did not build a fleet of warships. That would have been too easy. Instead, we built a second skin over our civilization. We built our freighters to become battleships. We built our mining ships to become carriers. We turned our whole society into a weapon and then we hid it. We hoped we would never have to use it." Hanul's eyes were like dark stones. "You did not attack a peaceful species, Ambassador. You attacked the most dangerous species that has ever lived. You just did not know it because we were polite. You mistook our patience for weakness." Kalar felt a coldness deeper than space itself. He finally understood. He had not been fighting a new weak race. He had been fighting a monster that had spent centuries learning how to chain its own darkness, and he had just broken the chain. "You gave us a new target," Hanul continued, her voice barely a whisper. "You gave all that terrible, ancient anger a place to go. You united us against an outside enemy for the first time in centuries." She leaned forward just a little. "You thought you were putting out a small fire, but you just poured fuel on the embers of a sun." She stood up, looking down at him. "Well done, Ambassador. You just provoked the galaxy's deadliest species." The words hung in the silent air. They were not a boast. They were a statement of fact. It was the most terrifying thing Kalar had ever heard. He had no answer. There was nothing to say. He had wanted to teach the humans a lesson about power, but they had taught him a lesson about survival, and it was a lesson he knew he would never forget. Hanul turned and walked away. Her job was done. The message had been delivered. Behind her, Kalar sat in his chair, a broken leader in a broken ship surrounded by the silent, waiting ships of humanity. He knew then that the galaxy would never be the same. The great meeting hall of the Galactic Commons was silent. The room was a circle, with seats for hundreds of different species. Today, every seat was filled. They were all watching the human representative. It was not Captain Hanel. It was not the diplomat Taiho. It was Jin, the xenobiologist. He stood alone in the center of the room. He looked small and young. He wore a simple, plain uniform. He did not look angry or proud. He looked calm. He looked like a teacher about to give a lesson. On the view screens around the hall, the images from the battle in the Sol system played. They showed the human civilian ships changing into warships. They showed the Cathari fleet being taken apart with cold, precise movements. They showed the Cathari ships, broken and powerless, drifting near Mars. There was no sound. The images were enough. When the recording ended, Jin stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but the microphones carried it to every corner of the room. The Cathari Empire attacked a human world, he said. They killed our people. They believed we were weak. They were wrong. He paused, looking around at the many different faces. Insectoid eyes, mammalian fur, reptilian scales. They all watched him, afraid to move. Humanity does not wish for war, he continued. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We only wish to be left in peace. He said these words in a soft, simple tone, but after what they had just seen, the words felt heavy and dangerous. For a long time, we hid our true nature. We believed that if we were peaceful, others would be peaceful with us. The Cathari showed us that this was a naive hope. So we will hide no longer. On the main screen, a star map appeared. The territories of the different species were colored in light blues and greens and yellows. The human territories, which had been a soft white, now turned a deep solid gray. It was not a threatening color, but it was a serious one. It did not ask for attention. It demanded respect. This is our space, Jin said, pointing to the gray area. Do not enter without permission. Do not threaten our people. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. He looked directly into the camera, and his calm eyes seemed to look at every individual in the galaxy at once. We are the best friends you will ever have, he said. We will share knowledge. We will help in times of need. We believe in community. He paused one last time, and his voice became even quieter, which made everyone lean forward to hear. And we are the last enemy you will ever make. The choice is yours. He gave a small, polite nod. Then he turned and walked out of the Great Hall. He did not wait for questions. He did not wait for a debate. The lesson was over. Aboard the Odyssey, the mood was quiet. The ship was moving away from the Galactic Commons Station, heading back toward Earth. The stars outside were peaceful and bright. Suman stood on the bridge, looking at a star chart. The human territories were now marked in that steady gray color. It looked strong. It looked permanent. They will never look at us the same way again, she said. Her voice was not happy or sad. It was just a fact. Captain Hanul came to stand beside her. She also looked at the stars. Her face was tired. She had carried a great weight, and now she had put it down. No, Hanul agreed. They will not. But for the first time, they will see us for what we truly are. The crew worked around them. The ship hummed softly. They were going home. But home was different now. Humanity was different now. They had taken off the mask of the peaceful, harmless newcomer. They had shown the galaxy the face of a species that had survived its own darkness. They were not monsters, but they were not victims either. They were something in between. They were a species that had learned the hardest lessons the universe could teach and had lived to remember them. The stars outside no longer looked like simple lights in the dark. They looked like silent witnesses. They had seen what humanity could do, and they would remember. The Odyssey flew on, a small ship carrying its crew back to a world that was now and forever safe.